All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Duggan, and we're pleased that you can all join us for this week's lecture in Volume 3 of our 12-week No Neuropsychology Didactic Series, which brings lectures from experts in the field covering different topics each week. The series was created by trainees and early career neuropsychologists to provide free, high-quality didactic opportunities. We would like to thank our financial sponsors for their support in the series. And before we start, here are disclaimers for the series. The training is not meant to replace any formal education in neuropsychology, and the views of the speakers are their own. If you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A box in the lower part of the screen. And just so everyone knows, a recording of today's lecture will be provided on our website later this week. All right, so today we have an amazing panel of three incredible women neuropsychologists on pragmatic advice for women in neuropsychology. And I'll preface that by saying not just women neuropsychologists, but just incredible neuropsychologists who happen to be women. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cynthia Cuba. She's an interim vice dean of faculty development at the School of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University, and professor of neurology at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University. She was elected a fellow in the American Psychological Association in recognition of her contributions to the field. Dr. Cuba has worked primarily throughout her career in functional neurosurgery teams, and her research has been funded by the NIH Brain Initiative with an interdisciplinary focus on clinical ethics, neuroscience, psychology, and neuromodulation. Dr. Cuba has a passion for faculty development, particularly women's professional development, and has spearheaded education and advocacy efforts around this theme at the institutional, regional, and national levels. Dr. Cuba has served for the Society of Clinical Neuropsychology, as well as she's a founding member of the Women in Neuropsychology Committee, member at large, council representative, and is the current president-elect of SCN. Welcome to Dr. Cuba. Second, we have Dr. Michelle Madore. She's a multiracial Filipino woman working as a clinical neuropsychologist at the VA Palo Alto Healthcare System in the Mental Illness Research, Education, and Clinical Center, or MIREC. There she serves as the director of the National Clinical Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation Program, and is also the co-director of the Sierra Pacific MIREC Advanced Fellowship at the VA Palo Alto Healthcare System. She is the site PI on two multi-site funded studies looking at neuroimaging biomarkers of treatment response to TMS in treatment-resistant depression. Dr. Madore is also a clinical assistant professor affiliated with Stanford University School of Medicine's Department in Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She's involved in several professional organizations and serves as the chair of the Public Interest Advisory Committee for the Society of Clinical Neuropsychology. She's also co-finance officer of the Asian American Psychological Association and treasurer for the Asian Neuropsychological Association. Welcome, Dr. Madore. And last but not least is Dr. Courtney Ray, who is the co-founder and current president of the Society for Black Neuropsychology. She received her PhD in clinical psychology from Loma Linda University in California and completed her pre-doctoral internship training at Loma Linda University School of Medicine. She completed her postdoctoral fellowship at Positive Outcomes Psychological Services in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Ray is certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy and certified in ADOS administration. She's a member of the American Psychological Association and the Society for Clinical Neuropsychology, the International Neuropsychological Society, and the Society for Neuroscience. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Fairleigh-Dickinson University and City University of New York, Brooklyn College. Welcome, Dr. Ray. All right, just as I was getting ready to be the moderator of this panel, I just did a quick review of kind of where we're at with things in women in neuropsychology. And some people who are attending might not realize that we do actually have the literature about women in neuropsychology within our field. And here are kind of 4 key papers that I saw kind of in looking at the most recent literature. within this field. I really like this title on Shift Happens, Gender Composition in Clinical Neuropsychology over 5 decades. And overall, I was kind of taking away from the literature that the total number of women pursuing career in neuropsychology has definitely grown over time. And there's been some more equitable representation in some areas. We see that women have increased, um, and that we know that there's more women in positions like directorships of training programs or who are getting board certified. But overall, the literature has been showing that women still comprise the minority of leadership positions within most of our organizations and on relevant editorial boards and within fellow positions within our professional organizations, as well as lots of other different areas. And so this takes us to, what can we do about it and how do we support one another in this field? And so I think we couldn't have a better panel of women to speak to some things. And as we were kind of discussing what we thought was most useful for our attendees today, we wanted to kind of touch on these topics of what are some unique challenges to women in neuropsychology? How do we find mentors and sponsors? How do we deal with the financial negotiations within our field? How do we address family planning and seeking leadership opportunities? And so these are the main things that we'll try to touch on today. But as time permits, we'll try to touch on any other questions that everyone submits in the chat. So with that kind of start off there, I'd like to jump in and hear from our panelists. And I'll just kind of open the floor of how you guys want to respond. But let's start off with, what are some challenges that you feel are unique to the women in neuropsychology today?
I don't mind kicking off discussion. I mean, I just, because like I'm older than everybody else here probably, but I think in my way of thinking, some of it, there are a number of issues and challenges with women in neuropsychology. I think that in some of the organizations, particularly Div 40 or SCN, it's not as much of an issue as it used to be, largely because the advocacy efforts of WIN and because there's supportive leadership, right? But nonetheless, we have to maintain that work, and now even greater focus in terms of minorities and diversity, broadly speaking. I think one of the challenges is in academic medicine in general. And academic medicine in general really prioritizes getting your work out very early in your career at a time that conflicts with when you want to have children. Academic medicine is a very hierarchical kind of culture in which typically there's sociology data that white surgeons sit at the top and women PhDs are going to be way down towards the bottom. And that doesn't even look at the intersectionality of gender and race and so on. And so I think that challenges have to do with those external pressures within academic medicine. Challenges have to do with limited leadership opportunities and just those that it's conflicting in terms of when it's really important to get out there and to pursue other life goals after you've been in training for 10 plus years. But I'll just throw that out as a way of kind of initial response.
That's a great start.
And I would just like to add to all of that, especially, so Dr. Kubo was talking about like the mid and later career kinds of things that you see with people who have gone through their career and now they're seeing, okay, how have they compared to the other people who are in the same positions? But it starts even earlier, like in the trainee stage as well, where you see young people who want to pursue this, young women who want to pursue this field might not have mentorship. They might not have anyone who they can look to, and maybe in the wider sphere, there are people who they can see, but typically in their own schooling, in their own training, that might not be readily available. You might not have somebody directly accessible to you who can provide that mentorship and leadership for you and being a model to what it is to, as Dr. Kuba was talking about, balancing work life in a way that maybe sometimes men are not socialized to have to worry about balancing, And I think that socialization as well is part of it in terms of our an ability to see what are the things that we can offer. Many times, I see that my camera kind of, there we go. Oh, went back here. All right. So I know that many times women are socialized to think of themselves last and sometimes think of ourselves as not being the ones who speak up. And even though we are at an academic level, when you once you get to graduate school, you've done a whole lot to get to where you are. But then there's the idea of going out and pursuing a lot of these different opportunities. And sometimes imposter syndrome is something that everybody feels, but I think often women feel it to a much more a larger degree to some extent. And sometimes seeing these different academic opportunities or professional opportunities, it's very common. I hear a lot of young women, well, I don't have this, or I don't have that, I don't have this thing, this one specific thing. And so I can't apply. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to put my name as a nominee or for this thing. Whereas, a lot of our male counterparts don't have those sorts of hangups about whether or not they're going to just go ahead and even if they're not necessarily qualified in all of the different recommended or preferred qualifications, they'll still go ahead and say, hey, I want to go ahead and put my name in there. And
I think there's been some studies that have actually shown that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That men, even if they're kind of like a okay fit, they'll still go ahead, even though women, they're going to wait to be a perfect fit for something.
Exactly.
And even then they're kind of shy about putting themselves forward.
And just kind of to add to what everyone else has been saying, I think some of the undertone of the great comments that have already been provided is this idea that women are held to a different standard, right? Where we are asked to do more. In addition to being socialized to putting ourselves second, we're asked to do more to accomplish or get over the same hurdle. Particularly as a woman of color, I have noticed that in my training and in different opportunities that I've tried to pursue, the things that I'm being asked to do are above and beyond what they would have asked any of my white male colleagues to do. And if I want to get there, well, I better do those things or I'll go ahead and be left behind. So how do we support one another so that we can change the standards that are being placed on us? In a somewhat unjust manner.
I think that's perfect. I mean, and we talk about this, I've done a little bit of work in this in terms of expectations and role expectations. And women have to walk this narrow tightrope, I've always thought it, in terms of gender role expectations versus leadership role expectations, and they're discordant. And that creates some real problems. And some of it, we can't change other people's beliefs and thoughts. We can only change our own beliefs and thoughts and behaviors. So Dr. Ray's point, as well as Dr. Madore's point, is very well taken, right? It's that, you need to go out there and support one another. And I think you have to challenge some of those narratives. And my point has always been that the people who need to challenge the narratives are the ones that have more social capital and less to risk. And so that means it's the mid-career and more senior people that have to get out there and say, yeah, this isn't right. And this is what we're going to do. Because when you're junior faculty, are just starting out, those pressures are more, you need to be protected and that needs to be fostered more, right? And so it's the people kind of, a little bit more senior in their career that really have to own the bulk of this. I think it doesn't mean that the junior faculty don't, but I think that we're the ones that have to take the body blows, if you will. And there's also a whole literature out there in terms not only the expectations, but how women are supposed to be giving and kind and sharing and all these other things. So I think recognizing, first of all, that there are these expectations that we hold that we need to get rid of, right? And then how do we engage other more powerful people to just kind of help pave that way? The only other thing I want to say too, because we often forget about this, I always thought that your career went in this linear fashion, which is a fallacy. And there's data out there that it kind of goes like this. And the overall trajectory is up. So you look at my CV and it's like pregnant with kids, and then, oh, grade school. Oh, divorce. oh, they're out of the house, right? You see what I mean? And I think that it's having those kind of narratives and sharing those kind of stories openly and realizing that not everybody has to be perfect in every single box. And I'll stop now because you know how passionate I am about all this.
Those are just such incredible points. And I I think I want to take a moment, there's lots of things for us to talk on, but I do want to create some space for us to talk more explicitly about what those things are. Because what we're talking about, it sounds like, are expectations that we have ourselves, expectations that are placed upon us, and then the additional layers of the experiences of women of color and of diverse backgrounds within those spaces. And so, to the extent that you all feel comfortable, I wonder if you could speak more explicitly about what those types of expectations and stereotypes and difficulties, the barriers are that women face in these situations. I think knowledge is power in a lot of ways. And so, kind of knowing what could be around the corner is helpful for people.
So one concrete example that I can think of that I'll pull from the literature first before I start opening up my own kind of knapsack of things is there is literature that shows that women of color or individuals of color are held to a higher standard for the same metric. So since the majority of people participating in this today are aspiring neuropsychologists or aren't neuropsychologists, if you think about supervision and training in report writing, right? So student A has a report and they make a mistake. And their supervisor goes, okay, great job. I'm really glad that, you tried this out. This wasn't quite what I was looking for. Let's try it this other way. Student B, who happens to be a trainee of color, turns in very similar mistake on their neuropsych report. And rather than being told, hey, great job, they're being told things like, oh, you know what, that's a mistake. At this stage of your training, you shouldn't be making these mistakes anymore. And whether or not these are things are happening consciously or unconsciously, these things are happening. And this is what is holding women back from succeeding. This is what's holding people of color back from succeeding, that the exact same training or learning opportunity is being treated differently based on demographic factors, if you will. And I'm going to step off my soapbox because I got quite a few things to say about that.
It's a terrific example.
I think that's a great example. And I can just anecdotally talk about a situation. I'm not going to name where this was or who it was as a supervisor, but something similar like that has happened to me before. And there's something very vividly that I remember a situation where I did a neuropsych report and I wrote, just all the results, all the data in the table, and the the person who was my supervisor was like, "Oh, this is wrong. This is, you should double check this because da 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 da," and like kind of, you know, was very, just articulating that it was wrong in a way that was a little bit talking down and demeaning in a way, like kind of dressing me down about, oh, you should make sure that you're always looking at these things or whatever. And I was just kind of like, wow, I thought that I double checked that. I thought that I made sure that everything was fine. And then come to find out, I looked in like the norms section, and I was right. I had it. So then I took the book to the person and I said, well, look, I did this exactly the way that it should be done, and this is what the norms are, and this score is correct. And he's like, oh, it wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no sorry, no, oh, great work, I shouldn't have been so punitive. It was like, oh, well.
Yeah,
right?
It's just like, oh, whatever. And I think that there's this idea that women are always going to be, deferent, and they will not speak up. And if you make a mistake, you take the punishment. And if you point out that you've done something good, you don't get any affirmation or acknowledgement. I mean, I didn't need a pat on the back, but I just, acknowledge that you were wrong. you know?
Yeah, you're like, I don't need a cookie. I just want you to take back what you just said to me.
Exactly.
The only example well, not the only, but one of the best examples is what I entitled an article because I thought it was such a perfect title, and that I applied for a leadership position, and rumors were floating around and with a comment, who does she think she is?
Yeah.
And I loved that because this was a title on women in leadership. Who does she think she is? And I thought, wow, and at the time I was a little bit surprised because I was writing this paper and I thought by this time it would be better than when I started in my career, but it hasn't. It's like water on a stone. My daughter's about the same age I was when I started getting into all these ideas, and it's better, but it's not substantially better. And the dreams that I had for her, there's still so much work to do, but who does she think she is? The other thing that I haven't encountered an awful lot, but I'm starting to, and I know some of my other colleagues have, is not only, sexism and our gender issues and things, but also a little bit of ageism, right? It's like, oh, you've been here for so long, we know what you're going to say and think anyway. And it's like, well, no, I'm just hitting my stride here. And I challenge you to keep up, right? But I think that some of my friends are finding that, and that gets to be really complicated discussion because how do you manage all of those intersectionalities? And I'm not sure that we have good data on that, but it's clearly there.
Yeah. And as all of you are talking about these things, I think you're weaving in kind of things that you've been doing to support yourself as you face these challenges. But I wonder if each of you could speak a little bit more to, and Dr. Kuba, you have mentioned that we need to rely on kind of the people who are more established to support people earlier on, but just in general, what other supports or kind of pragmatic things can people do when they're facing these types of challenges and barriers?
I think one thing, and I've learned this, is you have to develop a thick skin and you have to realize that it's not all about you. Sometimes it's just part of the culture and the society doesn't make it right. And you just have to kind of continually keep faith and know that this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And if it's an issue broader and bigger than yourself, I think it's easier to pull other people along that way. And so that's one thing, as well as, exercise, good friends, dark chocolate, red wine.
And that goes back to also the way that women are socialized to kind of put other people first, and that it's hard for women to kind of realize that it's not all within our control, and that sometimes it's just kind of building that thicker skin a little bit.
And it doesn't mean, you can ask, and the worst they can do is say no, right? And it doesn't mean you accept this, like you're going to get to negotiation. Well, I'm sorry, is the work I've done average or not? Well, no, then why am I paid at an average rate, right? Mm-hmm. So you can advocate. Sometimes humor helps with that.
Yeah. Other recommendations for supports?
I think having someone, as Dr. Kubu was saying, who can be an advocate for you, or an ally with you if you're at the same peer level, but someone who might have some more social capital that they can expend, that is helpful, because some of the battles that you're going to face are things that you won't be able to do on your own, and you're going to need someone else to be in your corner to help you out. And so establishing those connections and networks. And I think that even though this is obviously a discussion about women in neuropsychology, I think that making sure that some of our men who might be listening, you guys are allies and advocates and speak up as well, because you have a position of privilege that you can use to help and to help the people who are around you. And so I want to encourage the men who might be on the broadcast today to use that when you see something that you think needs to be brought up and to someone's attention.
Yeah, I found personally that little bit of bravery of being willing to discuss it with our colleagues and our friends, you find more allies than you were expecting. And just putting those things on their radar can be extremely helpful in a lot of ways.
And it helps you just feel like you're not crazy. Like, like this isn't just all in your head.
Yeah, the sanity check, right? One of the things that I know that I personally have done, and I tell a lot of people this, and I feel like I say this in a lot of different talks, is, your friends and your mentors and your sponsors are your toolbox. And whatever you do, don't only limit that resource to those who are physically around you or who are in your exact setting. If you are not getting a need met, or if you feel someone at your workplace, your graduate program isn't able to bounce off ideas, or isn't someone you feel comfortable talking with about a particular issue, grow that network, right? While I love being a neuropsychologist and being a part of Division 40 has a special place in my heart and in my leadership path, I really wanted to be mindful that I did not see a lot of, Asian female neuropsychologists in leadership there. And so I was like, I'm gonna reach out and I'm gonna join additional organizations because this need and this part of my identity and this part of my career development isn't being met. And so I joined the Division on Filipinx Americans and the Asian American Psych Association, and was able to grow and understand the impact of my leadership skills in the context of my culture and my cultural background and my cultural beliefs in the context of being a professional psychologist. And sometimes we don't give those things enough discussion. We don't acknowledge that importance. There's a lot of talk about representation matters, and sometimes it's your community matters just as much as the representation. And if your community isn't physically located where you are, go find them, right? The other thing is utilizing the resources that are out there in whatever capacity that you can. So lots of different organizations have mentorship programs, right? Some of them are long-term mentorship programs, some of them are short-term mentorship programs. And seizing any opportunity you have to discuss about something. I cannot say how invaluable it's been to have such a broad community so that when I did experience a microaggression when I was a trainee or as a adult adult neuropsychologist, I was able to go to one of those people because I couldn't go to somebody in my setting. I needed to talk to somebody to figure out, am I dealing with this properly? Am I losing my rocker? I need a sanity check here. This happened to me. Um, can I get a friend? Right? And so realizing that there are people out there who want to help you, who want to support you, um, is important. Don't just look inside your programs, because in the moment when you're there, it feels like that's the end all be all. This is how I'm going to get to where I need to go. That's not how it is. That's not how this works. So I think that that's the two things I'd like to add to what has already been brilliantly expressed by Dr. Ray and Dr. Kubu.
I want to kind of push on that a little further, because you guys are mentioning just really the importance of having supports in lots of forms. And that is so critical. And so I wonder if one of you would be comfortable in talking about, because I know a lot of times trainees are not sure what's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so what those differences are, and then what are those organizations? Where can they find mentors and sponsors? How do we go about doing that?
I'm happy to jump in first. I feel like I just recently gave a talk talking a little bit about this. So a mentor is really someone who is meant to give you training. I'm going to teach you X, Y, and Z. A sponsor is someone who's using their social capital, their privilege, and putting their name on the line for you to bring you up to a particular opportunity. right? So that's the difference. You're finding people who are willing to use their social capital. So let's take a quick concrete example. We're at a social event, Division 40 APA, when we used to be able to hang out with one another in person. God, I miss people. Someone comes up to me and says, "Hi, Dr. Madore, this is my student, so-and-so, and they're really looking towards applying to a position at VA Palo Alto." Sponsorship, right? That person that I know says, "Hi, you know me, we know each other. I want you to meet this trainee. They're coming your way," right? And so my impression is going to be influenced by the person that I know. And men do this kind of thing all the time. The business world does this thing all the time. And whether or not that person that they're sponsoring is even worth a crap, they'll do it for them anyway, right? And so that's kind of the difference between those two things. If we're looking for mentorship or support, Division 40's Ethnic Minority Affairs subcommittee has a mentorship program, or it can be short term or long term. The way that it works is that it's got a survey where you check off the types of things that you are interested in getting either mentorship or supervision on. Anywhere I've had mentees where we talked about microaggressions in their training sites, all the way from I'm applying to internship, can I get support on that process? So there's a wide variety of topics for that. I know that the Asian Neuropsych Association is working towards revamping our mentorship program. The Asian American Psychological Association has what they're calling mentorship office hours. So you can sign up for an hour with a professional and talk to them about whatever professional related things that you feel comfortable with. And the people who are holding the office hours will provide a brief description of the things that they feel comfortable talking about. I know HNS has one. I know Society for Black Neuropsychology has one, and I will not steal her thunder, so I will. So I'll stop now.
Well, yeah, SPN does have one. And actually, two of the people who are in Know Neuropsychology are involved in our mentorship program and have been put and created this great opportunity to help connect professionals to those who are still trainees. And so Annie Reyes and Dr. Will McBride are the people who are in charge of our in SBN's mentorship program. And if you go to Society for Black Neuropsychology.org, you will be able to find more information on our mentorship program that we have. And so I know, like Dr. Madore said, we have one for SBN, HNS has one, ANA is revamping theirs. And so there's so many opportunities that are out there. So I don't want anybody who's a trainee at any level to feel like they are alone in this. There's lots of places that you can turn to for help.
The other thing I want to just say, because these are outstanding programs that both Dr. Madore and Dr. Ray have discussed, is that you can also ask somebody. I had somebody that emailed me out of the blue because she knew I'd done some of this one paper. And what you can do, you don't go up to somebody and say, "Please be my mentor," because that's a little bit overwhelming, because I've raised 2 kids, I'm done, you know what I mean? But you can approach somebody, you could say, "Look, I have a specific question. Can I take you out for a cup of coffee to follow through on this specific question? I'd like your advice on this." Have the conversation, follow through with a thank you email, and then say, "If something else comes up in the future, can I get your advice?" Right? That's how you can do these kinds of things, right? Because it's a little bit overwhelming to be responsible for all of somebody's professional development who may not be in your lab or whatever, right? But you can do that. And I think a lot of people are very committed to paying it forward. And that's the only thing I require of anybody who reaches out to me. Just promise me you're going to pay it forward. And so I think that you can, I'll tell people, ping me again if I don't get back to you right away, but you can go in with a specific question and ask, follow through with a thank you, as I said. And I think that's how relationships and ultimately friendships can develop. I think that's how some of my closest advisors and friends professionally, that's how those relationships developed.
Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
the takeaways, there's so many resources. I know that I'm also chair of the Association for Neuropsychology Students and Trainees, and we do a lot to kind of connect students with resources, and that's the trainee organization of SCN or Division 40. AACN, the American Academy of Clinical Neuropsychology, has a formal mentorship program also, and the Education Advisory Committee of SCN does consultations when students have more kind of targeted questions that they want to just get consultation on. So there's, I mean, if you build it, they will come. I mean, I think everybody has a formal program or is willing to provide or give you some assistance. And so it's really sounds like a matter of kind of identifying what you would like help with and finding a way to kind of just present that in a little small piece and ask for assistance and then go from there. You don't have to tackle everything all at once. Um, I have my eye on the time, and we have lots of other big topics to hit
Yeah.
on.
Can I just say one thing before we move off, and this is just as a placeholder, is that, you know, this was a kind of women in leadership and leadership development. I think two important things that I would just ask you to do, that requires a lot of thought and reflective thinking about what you want to do, because leadership is influence and you have to figure out what you want to lead toward and for and why. And so I just want everybody out there to realize that it's not just an ultimate goal, it's a purpose. And so what is it that you want to, and you're looking at, you know, I look at Dr. Madore, I looked at Dr. Ray, we clearly know what their brand is and why they're leading and what they're passionate about, right? And if you're going to lead, you have to figure out why and what for. And that's not a trivial question. But I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes we forget that in our desire to move forward. Sorry to
No, that's the perfect transition to my next topic on seeking leadership in academia. So, you know, I think traditionally women have, I don't think, I know because of the research has shown that women are underrepresented in leadership positions within our profession and within our colleagues related professions to us in academic institutions. And so I would like maybe the panelists to speak just a little bit more about the importance of seeking leadership positions, but the thoughtfulness that goes behind that. And um, what are the benefits also of, you know, not only kind of putting yourself forward to have that goal, but how does it return to you as a professional? I think sometimes we see it as only a give and not a take also.
I'll just say that personally, I felt that um, and being a person in leadership has been beneficial because I've been able to help meet a need in my community and meet a need where I felt there was not a lot of representation that was targeted towards a specific demographic. But also, I feel like I've been able to get back as well in getting people who around me who were aligned with that same cause and being able to cultivate those sorts of relationships in a way that might not have been possible had I not linked up or stepped up or been very vocal in making sure that in saying that this is something that's important to me. And so you find other people who are like-minded who help you along in the things that are important to you and your career objectives and in your desires to make a difference. And that those relationships are both professional and personal. And so a lot of people that I have created those linkages with have been because of in being in leadership with SBN. And I think that just like Dr. Cuba was saying, in terms of being targeted and understanding exactly what your goal and what your brand and what your idea is, it can be very overwhelming. And I think I wrote about this for WIN, the whole idea of, you know, there are lots of opportunities that often come up and you might feel pulled towards saying yes to everything when they come. And sometimes you don't have to say yes to everything. There are some things that you can say no to. There's some opportunities that you can say, that's not a great fit for me. Not because I'm not qualified, not because I can't do it, not because it's not something that I'm capable of, but just because it isn't something that aligns with whatever my goal or my objective is in my time of life right now. It might be that you come back to it later on. That's also a possibility. So just because you say no doesn't mean it's no forever, right? It can be no for right now. It can be no because I have something else. And knowing exactly what it is that you want to do and narrowing your focus towards that, because it can be easy to be kind of scattershot with all these different opportunities and spread yourself too thin and dilute your ability to really do the things that you want to do.
Absolutely. If we could do standing ovations in Zoom, I would give you one right now. It is so true, though, right? Because we have to do the things that are true to ourselves, that are true to our values, where we think that we're going to be able to enact change. I often wish I could say yes to everything. I really do, but I can't. I have a tiny human that relies on me to keep her alive, to get her to all of her doctor's appointments and therapies, that it just is impossible for me to do. But being someone who has a lot of personal responsibilities, I'm gonna merge two topics at once. Um, that I am very careful about what I say yes to and to who I say yes to. And when I find myself in those spaces, I say, this is what you can expect from me, right? I am dedicating my free time to said position, but I have this tiny human. This tiny human takes priority to me over everything. She may pop in and out of meetings. I'm surprised she hasn't been in this one yet, right? You may get to say hello to her. I may have to tell you I can't meet with you right now because she has an appointment, but I promise you I will get back to you. And putting in that framework and those boundaries that says you're important to me and what I do for this organization is important to me, but so is this. And understanding, people mentioned work-life balance, and I have found that absolutely impossible. And I call it work-life flow, where I know that work is going to flow and I'm going to have a lot more work at some point, and other times I'm going to have more of my life that I can focus on and less of my work. And it'll go up and down like that, maybe in the same day a bunch of times. But selecting things that you're passionate about. If I just took any old leadership position just to do it, then I don't think I would have been effective. I don't think I would be sitting here with these amazing neuropsychologists talking to people today here on this webinar. I'm actually like so honored to be here with these amazing people, to be like, wow, I'm one of these people. That's really cool, right?
Queen bee.
No,
For real.
but right.
But I
Sorry,
think,
no,
Michelle, just to riff off of it, because I was thinking about this, and I'll tell you, for me, it comes down to flow in terms of like positive psychology flow. If you and meaningfulness and meaningful work, you think Maslow, you think Erickson, you think all these great psychological theories, but that's what it is. If I'm committing my time and effort to something that's hard and engaging but really important, then I'm in the flow and it energizes me. It's fun. Sometimes it is a slog because there's always some like work that they're like, oh, I have to deal with this again. But the ultimate goal inspires you. And I think if you figure that out, it's fun. It's actually fun. It's like if you're writing in the flow, or if you're in a therapy session, you're in the flow, or you're figuring things out, then it becomes joy filled. And then that's energy producing, right? And reinforcing.
I just want to touch on two things that we've kind of snuck in, but kind of touch on some questions that people have been asking. One is, it sounds like all of you have no doubts that all of our women in neuropsychology can find leadership positions that they would be excited about and opportunities. And it's more of a matter of finding what you're interested in and excited in. And the more that you pursue things, the more that you will have to say no, because people will want you to do too much. And so I wonder, does anyone have any comments about saying no and
Yeah.
how to cope with that?
Dr. Kathy Holland gave me this advice. I'm not going to tell you how many decades ago, but many. And I love it. And I share it with everybody. Well, this is a really interesting opportunity. I'm very honored that you thought of me. Let me think about it overnight and then I'll get back to you. Because our knee-jerk response is to respond right away. And you want to make sure that you're going to be able to deliver. Because if you don't deliver, then that's your integrity. And then your social capital kind of takes a hit, right? And so I think that's one thing. It's a little bit easier to do after you have more social capital. Earlier on, you have to be much more judicious, and that's when you use your sponsors and your mentors and other people to kind of take those body blows from you and say, it's really important. The final thing that I've done with some of my fellows is I've actually asked them to practice telling me no. And I will say, look, you got to learn, and if you can't learn how to tell me no, you're going to be in a world of hurt going into any kind of academic medicine environment. And so practicing those skills. So find safe people to practice saying no to, right? In fact, some of the proudest days of my training life is when a fellow would tell me no,
I'll have to use that for my own fellowship. I'll just share also that someone recently kind of enlightened me to the idea of say no and then have a request after. Somebody is coming to you for something that they're interested in, and maybe it's not the right time or it's not quite the right opportunity, but you are interested down the road or something else, and that you can counter with a request saying, not right now, but maybe we can revisit this at a different time or something. And I think a lot of times, as people in general, but especially women, are afraid to counter with a different request or to modify the idea of what is being asked. All right, moving on. This is just such a big topic, and so I want to be able to touch on financial kind of and salary things and family issues. So we'll kind of use our time to touch on those two things. Nice and simple topics. So let's jump into financial negotiations and salary negotiations. What sorts of resources did you rely on to deal with these things, if any, or what have you learned after the fact that you wish you knew about in the past?
One of the things that I would say is don't be afraid to talk to people about salaries. I think we socialize ourselves just in general not to talk about salaries and money, but you're not going to know unless you ask, unless you talk, and I think that that's something that I had to learn. And that's something that I would have liked to have learned earlier, that it's okay to to have people that you talk to find out going rates at different places, because and this is where it really does help to have somebody who is in a network that's a trusted person who's in your area, because what might be the going rate in California might be very different than Kansas, right? And so if you're going to Kansas, you can't be you can't think, okay, well, this is what was in California, or you might wind up selling yourself short if you're used to Kansas and you go to California and you're asking for something way lower than you really should have asked for. So it's really important to really ask questions and be okay with that, and knowing that there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we need to take away that stigma of not discussing those types of things.
Yeah. And then, so I work in the VA, and the salary structure is very structured, but there is some wiggle room, and each VA is different. So the salary that you enter in the VA system is based on your education and work experience. But as you take on more responsibilities, do things outside and above your typical staff psychologist job, you can increase in what they call steps at a more rapid rate than what is required, or you take on a whole bunch of stuff like I did, and you could ask to be put in another GS level. So even in environments where things are structured that way, there is always some type of wiggle room, and it comes down to asking, what is it that I need to do to get to that next place, and then do those things.
And I think that's it. I think that you both touched on preparation And then also the thing that I would say is part of preparation in terms of asking and knowing the data and kind of surveying the landscape is practice how you're going to ask.
Yep.
And we don't practice how we're going to ask often enough, right? And that's another thing I do with my fellows is like, come into my office, tell me how you're going to ask for such and such a salary. Because the more you practice, you're not going to like stutter over your words. You're not going to smile, or you're going to be very straightforward. Say, look, this is what I'm worth. This is the going rate. This is what I'm worth. And also when you're looking at negotiation, I just told a recent fellow is like, they're going to cover moving costs. We'll say, can I take that in my base salary in lieu of covering the moving cost? Because that automatically bumps you up in terms of your base salary, and that's benefits, retirement, and things like that. And so you're going to grow faster, right? So look at kind of long-term goals with some of those negotiations as well. But I can't emphasize enough that preparation is also practicing how you're going to have these conversations, and then also aim higher than what you really want so you can come down gracefully. And negotiation is not just salary. It can be time to prove yourself with a grant. It can be time to do other kinds of professional activities. So think about it broadly and not just the salary.
But it can also be time for managing your life. So I don't know, Emily, if I have time to do a quick example. So very long story short, my tiny human was born extremely prematurely. So she was a micro preemie, and I unexpectedly had to go to the hospital like 3 months in advance of when we thought that she was going to be born. And because I work in a very structured environment, I know I've only accrued this much like vacation and this much sick time. And if I exceed that, I have to be without pay, right? So how do I juggle the confines of my financial situation, time with my child who's going to be in the hospital for giant question mark amount of time, and keeping my job? Oh, that I had started on November 1st, and magically on New Year's Eve, I was like, hey, surprise, I'm in the hospital. So it was a very stressful time, to say the least. So after I had gotten my bearings and had data and information, okay, this is how long I think she's going to be in the hospital. This is the amount of vacation and sick leave I have. What is available to me to get any additional resources? Is there a leave donation program? Things like that. And then I said, what do I need to do to be good enough for now to keep my job? Right? I don't have to be amazing. I just need to keep my job until my child gets out of the hospital. So I was still involved in professional leadership. And so for the things that I was doing, I was the chair of EMA at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm in the hospital, my kid is in the hospital. These are the projects that we're working on. Can you take on this and you take on this? And people were more than accommodating because I picked a community that understands, that's supportive. That was the leadership position I chose. I went to my boss and I said, look, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to come back to work part-time. I will physically be at the hospital when I need to see patients, but I would like to write all of my notes and all of my reports offsite. And then when I was able to transition again, and I said, okay, now she's coming home, I kind of still need this schedule. I'm ready to go back full time, but she's coming home on supplemental oxygen and a G tube and all of these things. So I would like to only come in for patients and do all of my administrative work from home. And they said, yes. I had no idea. I thought I was going to have to look for a new job, right? But I did an assessment. Well, what do I need to maintain? What do I need to do a good job, right? How do I negotiate this surprise life event and still move forward, right? And for me, it was asking, because you never know what they're going to say, but like was already reinforced, making sure you come in with the knowledge, knowing that I do good work, that I could manage to do this at home, and then relying on my community for support.
Thank you for sharing your example, because I think that really highlights that it's not just the money. It's our whole work life that is negotiable, and that we need to think
Yep.
very carefully about what that needs to look like, and that it's not going to happen if you don't ask for it. Um, Along those lines, I think that's a good transition to questions around kind of family planning and timelines of things. And we've touched on this a little bit, but if you guys could um, more explicitly comment on your thoughts around how do women, trainees, students, early career, mid-career, how do we think about these things and make in terms of making our decision? And a lot of times women face, fertility issues and concerns and all sorts of barriers. Just I'll open it up to general thoughts.
I was already talking, so I'll finish. I don't think that there is a good time. I think that we don't talk about the things that might happen. No one had ever talked to me that I might have like my kid might come early, much less like a whole trimester early. There's never, in my opinion, based on personal life experience, there's never going to be a good time. And that you personally have to make the decision as to do I have enough resources to do this in my life right now at this time point, no matter when it is. The work is always going to be there. You can always write that grant later. You can always write that paper later. Somebody else can see those patients. You get one life, right? And I choose to live a value driven life, and I will make those decisions that way. There's never a good time. So get the support you need and do it when you feel ready.
I think that's excellent. My mother, very early on, I was still nursing my daughter, and I said, I don't know how I'm going to make it to this big conference. I'm nursing Cece and the whole bit. She goes, well, doesn't that conference happen every year? It's like, oh yeah, and it's like the arc of your career is very, very long. The time that you have with your children is relatively brief. It really is. It doesn't seem like it sometimes when you're in the midst of it, but it is. And I think that just keeping plugged into a little bit about why you wanted to go into this career and doing it at some tiny level and keep that productivity, recognizing that, as Dr. Madore said, there's this ebb and flow. I think that's important. I mean, when all of a sudden I found myself divorced, I stepped back intentionally from traveling and leadership that required national travel or international travel for the most part, because I had to be there for my kids. But that doesn't mean that my career stopped, right? You're smart about where you invest those efforts.
It's 4:58 right now. Do you guys have about 5 more minutes extra? Speaking of work-life balance, for me pulling you away. Any other thoughts on parenthood?
It's fun.
I think it's important to talk about the joys of things too, so I appreciate that. Two super short questions and then I'll wrap this up. One is, I've seen this too in a lot of literature, that women tend to say sorry for everything that we do, and we preface with sorry. Um, how do you cope with that? What do you do to get yourself to stop saying sorry, or what do you say instead?
I
I will
delete
say,
it after.
yeah, I'll say sorry if I'm at fault. But what I'll say is, I wish that wasn't your perception. I wish the power of I wish statements is really, really good, particularly working with patients and even some of those patients who are colleagues, like with, disorders. So I think, I wish, or I just acknowledge, okay, I hear what you're saying, and you just have to stop.
Yep, I
Yeah,
delete it from my emails.
I've deleted it too. I am getting used to replacing with thank you. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for this, instead of apologizing all the time. How do you introduce yourself to your patients and your colleagues? And how do you deal with people not using your titles properly?
I always introduce myself as Dr. Ray to my patients. And it's very interesting. When I was in training, one of my professors, this is quite a while ago, he's a white man, and he was telling me, he was telling the class, like, oh yeah, I don't wear a coat or anything. And I kind of make little faux pas to put the patient at ease and stuff like that to help them to feel more comfortable when they're in the office and not be as nervous with the assessment. And you guys should do that too. And I'm just kind of like, that will work for you and not for me, because what might seem as relatable and jovial for a white man would probably come off as incompetent and bumbling for someone who is a woman of color, because there's already a perception that's there. And so, I always do make sure that they know that I'm the doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not, the receptionist. I'm not, and I try to be very mindful of that. And then I'll also will make sure that as I reiterate what I want them to call me. And sometimes people will feel a little bit bristly about that, but I don't make any apologies for it, because this is my profession. Outside of the professional realm, that's quite different. But in the office, when I'm seeing someone, that's how I've cultivated that. I continually reinforce that that's important.
Yeah. So I lead a national call it's predominantly psychiatrists learning TMS. We have a consultation call. And as the director of the program, despite introducing myself as Dr. Madore on every single call, I've been called Ms. Madore. And I've now started to interject immediately. That's so very nice of you to want to be respectful. It's Dr. Madore. I have a PhD. And then, well, I never imagined myself doing this. I have Dr. Madore in my signature line now, so that as I send emails out, they see that it's Dr. Madore and it's not Ms. Madore. It's not Michelle. I'm not your friend. I'm not your homie. We are colleagues. And if you're going to be referred to doctor, I damn well am going to be referred to doctors too.
That's another important point, and kind of the flip side of that, particularly in these hierarchical structures, right? And particularly as a junior or maybe the only woman on some of these teams, the leaders, say they be surgeons or whoever, will refer to you by your first name. Don't give them that power. If they're going to refer to you by your first name, you refer to them by their first name. And this is in team meetings and things like that. If it's a patient's present, it's always by the title, by everybody.
Yep.
But do that, and you practice how you sit. I'll tell you, I wear my white coat in those meetings to remind everybody this is why I'm here and this is my title, right? And you practice how you sit. You take up as much space as I possibly can. You're engaged with it, and you refer to them by their first name. If they refer to you by doctor, you respond in kind. But I think that if you don't pretend that it's a level playing field, then they're going to assume it isn't, and that you're complicit with the view that it isn't. So you have to pretend it's a level playing field until it is one, right? Until people start realizing that's how you treat everybody.
Amazing. Thank you three so much. I just want to share some additional resources that we've kind of alluded to, but I'll just put them on here so that people can see them, especially in the video afterwards. I think a lot of trainees don't realize that there are articles that are published on a regular basis that survey actual salaries of neuropsychologists, and these are the things that you need to walk in. So when they're saying data, you need information. This is where you get the data about what is the salary, what are the averages. This is what you use to walk into those negotiations. Additional articles that might be helpful there's several that are in academic medicine. I've personally found this article on linguistic comparisons of letter recommendations for women extremely helpful. There's an appendix in here that details which types of words people use for women and for men in their letters of recommendation. And I have actually handed this appendix to people before and said, please use as many of these words in all of the categories as you can when you're writing my letter. So there's some practical things you can do with things like that. If you want data on actual academic medical center salaries, you can look up by the institution or by the researcher, or and so it's important to be well informed when you're going into a situation. And so when they're saying find the data, this is where you're finding the data, is through these websites. Um, you can also get more information at the Women in Academia report. And then there's some useful blogs that I've been recommended many times by colleagues that are kind of nice to talk about some more of these topics in detail. There's many, many books on the topic. I would say the number one book that I've personally been recommended is Ask for It, and I've read it with some colleagues in a book club. And it talks about salary negotiations and how women, go about dealing with some of these things. So it's good to ask your mentors and your sponsors and other people in your life for recommendations also of the actual practical resources that they would recommend for you. All right. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week for our next lecture in our series. Thank you so much.